Yeah, so hi Shai, and thanks a lot for agreeing to participate in this interviewing series.
It's my pleasure.
I would say that we directly start, and could you perhaps briefly introduce yourself, like what's your academic career path, and what led you to your position at HKUST as an assistant professor?
So right now it's my second year working at HKUST CSE as an assistant professor. So before that, I spent about 1 year at ETH for a postdoc. And I got my PhD at Penn State University. I spent about 5 years there. And before that, I got my bachelor degree from Peking University in China. So generally speaking, I do research on computer security and also software engineering. So I often look for research opportunities across multiple communities. For example, I publish at security venues and also on software engineer venues, a little bit on system venues, and sometimes I write papers and submit to AI communities. So in that, I guess like one good thing do cybersecurity research is that you could like frequently find some opportunities to do some interdisciplinary research and try like different communities and see if they like your work. So I think that's a good thing about the cybersecurity research. So right now, my group, we have about we have four PhD students and also four master students. And so in this fall, so we will have uh, another four PhD students, and then we will have three master students graduate this summer. So I guess like gradually, we will become a big group in cybersecurity in Hong Kong.
Okay, well,
So
great.
that's my right. Well, basically what's happening with me in the recent 2 years.
And can you briefly give us an overview of HKUST? Like, where is it located, and perhaps also what are its core strengths, and how does it fit into the landscape in Hong Kong?
So I think generally speaking, HKUST is actually a very young university. I think it has about 30 years, 30 years, right? So at the very beginning, because in Hong Kong they already have like two very good university, which is HKU, Hong Kong University, and the CUHK, the Chinese U. So I think like back to 35 years ago, like they tried to establish another university which has a special focus on technology, and science and technology, so on and so forth. And they try to mimic like what's the top universities in US, like how it is managed. And they like follow like what's going on in the top university in US and establish HKUST. So HKUST is not it's actually it's it's near like a Bay Area, right? It's near a Bay Area. It's the communication is a bit difficult, especially when you want to travel to the like Hong Kong Island, right? So far from the so-called central of Hong Kong. You need to first take the bus and then uh, take the subway. Take me roughly like 1.5 hour to travel from HKUST to the central of Hong Kong. So I think on one hand, the good thing is that like so there's not so much fun, so you can focus on doing research, studies, and so forth. Another thing is that the negative part is that for example, if you wanna attend a meeting or do some internship, then probably like every day you probably spend like about 3 hours in commute. Right? That's definitely like a bad thing about HKUST. So I think the core strength is that like I just mentioned, so different from HKU and the CUHK. So HKUST, like at the very beginning, when they established this university, they have a special focus on the science and also technology. But of course, like later on, they also established some other, for example, business school. They have a very strong business school and also other research and education institute related to something related to human, something like that, right? Right. So I think there are things that right now they are establishing another campus called the Guangzhou campus. So that one is located. It's not located in Hong Kong. It's located in Guangzhou in mainland China. So they try to explore a way they can combine the two campuses to better offer a higher to better offer the college education and also the postgraduate education and also research. So I guess we will see. And we'll see the upcoming in another 30 years how the university could establish itself with two campuses.
I see. You mentioned that you mentioned the three top universities in Hong Kong, and besides this, there are also a couple of other universities, right? So I'm wondering, where do you get most of your students from?
So I think, generally speaking, for undergrad students, I would say most of them are still Hong Kong local students from local Hong Kong. I think for international students, I don't have an exact number, but I think for undergraduate, international student would at least account for maybe 30 or 40. But on the other hand, for postgraduate, which means PhD and master students, especially in computer science, I think many of them are from mainland China. For me, my students, I have two students from which are Hong Kong local, and the others they are all from mainland China. So typically our recruitment is that a department will have a general routine to take postgraduate students every September, October, and we will do a bunch of a number of interviews. But the other thing is that you can it's more flexible for you to go solo in a sense you could explore some top talent from mainland and directly contact with them, and then explore whether they want to come to Hong Kong and to do research together. Right, I think that's the two typical procedures to take students.
I see. So if I understand it correctly, there is one process where you can directly hire students, and another one where you have this central kind of admission process, or
right. So I think generally speaking, yes, it's we have two options. The first one is the department will set up some general admission interview process, and the other thing is that you can interview individually to some students you are interested.
And also to clarify, because not all people watching the video might know, so the official language of instruction is English, right, for the classes?
Right. So it's English. Right? On the other hand, I think typically it depends. It really depends. But for me, when I was discussing with my postgraduate students about the research or some other stuff, we will use maybe Chinese, Mandarin, because I cannot speak Cantonese.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. How has the learning curve been? How would you summarize the challenges that you had to overcome in the first 1 or 2 years since you've been an assistant professor?
So I think there are multiple aspects. So first thing is that in general, every assistant professor, when they start their career as an independent researcher, they will face a lot of tasks, establishing a course, preparing course material that's about the teaching. Second thing is that definitely doing research. So I think there's a good way to describe this. Speaking of research, they typically would benchmark your input and output. So for the input part, for first thing is that how many students you can recruit, how large a group you can maintain. That's first input. Second input is that how many grants you can get, right? That's the second input. But definitely it's not that's not only about the input. The output may be more important. It's that how many high quality papers you can publish and how many students can supposedly graduate within 4 to 5 years. It's input and output. That's about like research. Third thing is that about surveys, but I think for junior faculty, they do not have a high expectation about surveys. So I think generally that's fine. But I think beside that, those three factors are the general challenge for assistant professor. But for me, I would say because probably many of us were aware that things like there are some like social unstable things going on like about 2 years ago, which had lasted for about half a year. So that definitely caused some trouble. I would say it does not cause trouble to me, but actually cause trouble to my junior students. For example, like I had 3 students when I came here, and to be honest, like 2 of them talked to me saying like they do not want to stay here because they are worried about the unstable situation. So it turns out like every time when we were like having meetings together, I have to calm them, like to tell them like just calm down, it will be fine. Like no need to worry about that. Try to like find some way to convince them like this will not be too long. Like since the situation will change, so on and so forth. Second thing is that like the COVID-19 situation, it also caused some trouble. I think one thing is that for computer science, you do not need to use lab, right? You don't need to physically use lab. So the good thing is that you can always work in remotely. But the other thing is that it's hard to hire some like research assistant, because I have some funding with the industry. The problem is that I cannot hire research assistant. So the consequence is that I have to ask my PhD student to work on the engineering project. That actually hurt my like the publication pipeline a little bit. So until today, like it's really hard for me to hire some research assistant. So you might be surprised, but like for some engineering project with the industry, it's either my PhD student or myself working on that to write quite a number of code to deliver something. But I think the positive thing is that it's still manageable. It just like cause some problem.
I see. Yeah. Let's hope the situation improves again soon. So how did you find your first students and how did you bootstrap teaching?
Mm-hmm. So my first student directly contact with me. So he's actually like very active in some like cybersecurity competitions, like CTF competition. So I think that's something like he become like very motivated to do postgraduate study in this field. And he directly contacted me. I think he checked the web page of the CSE web page at the HKUST, and he found me and become interested in my research. So he directly contacted me. We have some interview, and eventually we decided to work together. So in terms of the teaching, I actually spent quite a lot of effort in working and preparing teaching stuff, right? So I think roughly speaking, for the first semester, I probably spent over 60-70% of my time to preparing the teaching materials, because the course was taught by some other instructors before, but he's mostly like oral in a sense like I do not use too many slides, but I'm actually on the opposite. So I need to write lots of slides, just go through slides. Right? Because I relate to that. I think right. So for the cybersecurity course, there's no good textbook for the reference. So in that sense, I always try to put lots of effort to preparing slides to let students to like refer to my slides. So that really takes a lot of time at the very beginning. But good thing is that I can reuse the course material after that. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't have a good strategy to bootstrap teaching. The only thing I would say is that you definitely need to spend more time as the first semester. You do not expect to spend much time in doing research in the first semester. That's my experience.
Okay, yeah. We didn't yet talk about the academic system actually in Hong Kong. So, I mean, historically, I would somehow assume that it would have, or it adopted the UK kind of system. But I also know that you have, for example, a tenure track process and so on. So what kind of system does Hong Kong use? Also in terms of funding and so on.
So I would say, generally speaking, it mimics the US system. But I think research-wise, it mimics the US system in like a way targeted on top-tier conference. So we benchmark the faculty in terms of like their what kind of like venue they are generally publishing, how many top-tier papers they can work out, something like that. But the funding is a bit different in the sense like, especially for junior faculty, there are not so many different funding opportunities in Hong Kong. I think generally speaking, as a junior faculty, you need to mostly focus on one like funding resource from the HK government. So that funding is like you apply it once per year. And if you wanna like get a promotion or get tenure, I think you probably need to get at least twice within your first 6 years. So that one is a bit competitive. And the problem is that you can only apply for one. You can apply once per year, and you need to get like at least twice within your first 6 years. I think in the US, there are more funding opportunities, funding resources, but in Hong Kong, for junior faculty, it's limited.
So I guess, like you mentioned, sometimes you also have some company funding in addition, right?
Right. So that one is it's so a good thing is that especially for me when I'm doing cybersecurity research, it's actually not difficult to get funding from like the industry in mainland China. For example, like we have some collaborations with Tencent cybersecurity lab, and we have like 2 big projects with Huawei to enhance its compiler, like the ARC compiler, and also its operating system. So that's a good thing, like you get some funding from industry. But I think you really need to think twice before you take such funding, because they really expect you to deliver something. So deliver something means that you probably need to spend quite a number of effort in engineering related tasks. So that would be intensive. Like I just mentioned, right, for me, I cannot get an RA. So that's really a big problem for me. So I actually write a lot of code for Huawei, and my PhD student also have to write some code. So that's something. But I guess for me, right, exactly. But I guess for me, I need funding, right? So I have to take that. Right? I think maybe like when I become a little bit senior, I would explore some other funding opportunities. I mean, research funding, not just about at this stage. Probably is out of my capability.
Makes sense. Okay. I would say let's start chatting about the interviewing process. I mean, it has been a while for you, but perhaps you can still recall some of it. Can you give us, first of all, an overview of the process and perhaps also the timeline, if you still remember it?
So my PhD advisor and me reached to the agreement to allow me to go to a job market at late October, early November. So that's definitely like not too early, but we have some discussions. They give me some suggestions, and we have several constructive discussions. I appreciate his.
Which year was that?
That's 2017. 2017. Right. So I appreciate his advice, and eventually, like I start to prepare the application package at early November, and then like I think the first thing is that I need to polish my resume, and then I start to discuss with my advisor, like who could be the letter writers. Right, he gave me some suggestions, and I followed his suggestion. So right, I reach out to some senior researchers in our field who know something about my research. So I reached out to them, and they agreed to write letters for me. So right? This one goes smoothly, and then like I start to work on. Let me see. I think I start to preparing the talk, preparing the slides for my talk, and simultaneously I start to like sorry, let me see. I think no, I think I start to write my like the personal statement, research statement, also teaching statement. And for most of the institutes, their submission deadlines are December 15th, right? If I still remember correctly. Right? So
Yeah,
I try my very
sounds about
best
correct.
to I try my very best to submit some applications before deadline. But actually, my advisor told me it's okay to submit after deadline because no one will look into the applications before the Christmas. So my advisor told me it's okay to submit after deadline. But anyway, I try to like catch up the deadline, submit. And right, I think after that, I start to prepare my job talk. During the entire winter break, I start to work on the slides, to work on the first version of the slides. And then like I forward to my advisor and he gave me some feedback. And I do a number of rehearsals in front of the entire research group. And they also gave me some feedback. I think I got my first interview in early February. I don't quite remember clearly, but I think it's early February. It's actually a very good one. So I was I was excited, but also like I don't know what to do, like which aspect I could improve. So it's kind of like a little bit nervous. So, but at that time I start to like just put all my effort to preparing the job talk, like prepare a job talk, and right I like before because for that institute they do not have like online interview. They directly invite me for like on-site interview, fly to their campus. So right, I think 2 days before my like flight, I start to like go through like the all the faculties in their like in their department to get familiar with their background. So I think a very good thing is that my I have a sibling, like my sister, is actually an undergrad student in that university, in that in that department. So she told me a number of like very useful information about different faculties there. So actually, like when I was like run into like senior faculty, like I mentioned like okay, my sister was taking your course. So that's a good way to like start a conversation so on and so forth. Yeah, but I think that's important. Like about 2 days before that, you need 1 day, 2 days before that, you need to get familiar with who are interviewing, who will be the potential interviewers, and if they can somehow feel like okay, so you did your homework, and they will appreciate that. They will definitely appreciate that. And
so at this time, did you already have the list of people that you were scheduled to talk with, or not yet?
Right. They send me a schedule saying like right in terms of like which person you need to have a short meeting with. So for those faculties, I definitely like pay special attention to understand their research and see whether we can find something to chat.
I see.
And then like I got some other like interview and I follow the probably the same procedure and. For the other like I think during that time I was just put all my efforts in the interview stuff. I like keep practicing my job talk. So there's always something you can improve about the job talk. Right, every time if I receive an interview, then I will spend some time to like just look into their specific institute, get some information.
Right. So I guess you didn't get any other kind of work done during this period then, right?
No, definitely no research. Right. So and then like it's a bit complicated because I also applied for some industry job. some research lab around that time. So they make offer pretty quick. So once I get their offer, I have a way to further discuss with the institute that I have interviewed before. So I say ask if you can make a decision soon. So some of them say no, some of them say yes, including HKUST. And also definitely HKUST is one of my dream. So I think that makes things go smoothly. I receive offer from HKUST and I quickly say yes. So
I see. Yep.
Right. Actually, some places haven't made a decision yet, but I think I do not need to wait. I want to go to the US.
Sounds great.
Right. That's the rough, the high level procedure.
So I'm curious. You already mentioned that the process, at least the decision process for companies, differs from that of universities in the sense that they decide faster often. The interviewing process.
From my experience, yes, but I guess it depends it really depends case by case.
I see. And was the interviewing process also the same or similar in the sense that there would be many one-on-ones? As you said, you applied for also research positions, right, at the industrial lab?
So for those one, it's mostly you give a talk and you speak with a few of them. I think generally speaking, yes, but it's it's not that large scale in the sense you give a talk and you meet a number of your potential future colleague. So right, so similar.
Great. So let's perhaps chat a bit more about the individual phases, starting with the preparation. When you already outlined, for example, how you approach the letter writers. One thing that I was curious about is the cover letter, because sometimes people say you don't really need to put much effort into the cover letter, just write one generic one, and some people say that you should basically customize them for the institution you're applying for. So can you perhaps share your thoughts on this?
So because I only have said I always on the other side of the table, I never become a people who reviewing cover letters, so I can only share experience about the writing, preparing cover letters. So I think for me, I have a template. I have a template about the general information, and I actually do not fine-tune the content of the cover letter. Right, as far as I remember, I didn't fine-tune the cover letter content. I just changed the address or right. So some routine information. But at HKUST, I have say some a package of some faculty application. I do see someone they fine-tune the content. For example, they put their personal some information that can link them with the institute they are applying for. For example, their friends also working here, or their families also around, something like that. I'm not sure if that will help. I'm really not sure if that will help.
I see. Okay. And what were your considerations when applying for institutions? To how many institutions did you apply, and did you have any kind of geographical preferences?
I think for me, I want to work in the university, but on the other hand, I think working in industry research lab is also a good option. So in that sense, I applied, and the other thing is that I have a two-body problem at that time. So it turns out I only applied for about. I didn't quite remember I think I applied for about maybe 15, something like that. And all of them are in big cities, for example, New York, Chicago, also LA, and also Hong Kong. I think I didn't apply institute at Singapore, but so because I think the two-body problem put some influence on my decision. The other thing is that I don't want to go to a not so good institute. It will become a problem for you to take students, to recruit students. So I was thinking all right, so in that sense, I would rather go to a research lab, right? research lab, they pay really well. And they are not that, they have a better like work-life balance. In that sense, I apply some like a good university I really wish to go, and also apply some like industry lab. I feel it's also a very good option. The third thing is that I need to think about the problem, and therefore I only apply some positions in big cities, big cities.
Makes sense. Yeah, and that's relatable. Just fast forwarding, how did you resolve the two-party situation at the end?
I think generally speaking, things work out naturally because like the Hong Kong, they have a good like industry of finance, so that would be good for the like my significant other to find a job here. So that one actually resolved my body problem, and actually that's why I apply like for example Chicago and also New York, Boston. They all have like a good industry of finance.
Okay, sounds good. And perhaps one last question about this phase. So, how did you structure your job talk?
I think this one. I think I appreciate my advisor's suggestion. So he suggests me to because I think one thing is that for job talk it's not you do not need to show off your publication. They invite you for on-site interview, indicate that they are already okay, they are already satisfied with your publication track record. So it's really not urgent for you to show off your publication. So instead, you really need to give a good talk. So in the sense, like probably you need to spend quite a while to give a good introduction. So my advisor suggests me, like for example, suppose you are preparing a 1 hour interview, 1 hour job talk. Maybe you want to spend like the first 25 to 30 minutes to give a good introduction to let everyone in the room to understand like what's going on here, and then like discuss about your research and also highlight like some future work, show your potential, like to demonstrate like you are not just limited to this particular topic. So my advisor mentioned like a good talk will indicate a lot of things, indicate your personality, indicate how you take questions, and indicate like your potential of teaching, so on and so forth. I think the key point is that definitely do not show off your publication unless there's a special reason to do so. Right. So like I just mentioned, for me, like I spend because my topic is about side channel. So side channel is a bit it's not that easy to understand. So in that sense, I actually spend about the first 20 minutes to introduce what is side channel and how the typical side channel attack works. And then for the following like 15 minutes, I talk about my own research. So definitely do not expect others to understand the technical details because it's not very possible. And sometimes if you put it in a very difficult, in a way that is difficult to understand, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's a good way to start some individual meetings, such that they can ask some technical details they didn't quite follow. Yeah. So that's following like 15 minutes, and then I spend about because I'm also preparing a 45-minute talk. So in that sense, I also spend some time to talk about the future work, to let others know like I'm not just limited to side channel research. To talk about some other research on like battery reverse engineering, battery code analysis, software security, so on and so forth. Right, so that's how I like organize the talk.
Okay, makes sense. Then I would say let's chat a bit about interviewing. You already mentioned that you interviewed or that you applied for institutions in the US and also Hong Kong. So I'm curious, was there any difference in the kind of interviewing style that they used or how the visit was structured?
I think in terms of the interview, there's no big difference. There's no big difference in the sense like you always start from like I think if speaking of difference, I think one thing is that in the US you need to have like a breakfast, you need to have lunch with with other faculties, but in Hong Kong, at HKUST I do not have like breakfast with like other faculty, but have lunch in another institute. I think I do not have any like breakfast or lunch or like dinner, something like that. But I think in US that would be pretty common. You keep talking during when you eat. Here in Hong Kong, probably that's not the common case. I think other than that, I would say they are mostly the same. They're mostly the same in the sense like you start from some individual meeting. Start from talk with your host, and then like maybe a little bit individual meeting, and then directly like at roughly like 10 or 11 a.m. in the morning, you start to prepare the job talk, and then like in the afternoon you have quite a number of individual meetings, and then probably the other day you continue to have more individual meetings in some other faculties, something like that. I would say they're quite same.
And after the interview, did you still have time to, for example, explore the city as well?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Actually, no, because it's actually like already, I feel quite tired after every interview. So I was just, okay, why not just quickly leave here, just go home. So I actually do not do that.
Do you have any special kind of memories about the interviewing processes, So any kind of perhaps good or embarrassing moments that you can recall?
Yes, definitely. So I think like they will really ask you some like some interesting questions. For example, like when I was meeting with a senior faculty who was the dean of the like the school. So he asked me a question like, who is the best researcher in your field? So I mentioned like, okay, I think it's like the research group from CMU and also UC Santa Barbara. They are the two best in the like in my field. And he responded like, okay, we only hear the best. So I was I don't know what to say. And he asked me another question. He asked me like, okay, so suppose you are teaching a course and the students just do not attend. So what could you do to? So what could be your reaction? So I think I was quite naive at that time, because I mentioned something like, okay, so I'm gonna like make the course more interesting to like somehow to motivate them to like think, okay, so this guy's or this course is interesting, so I want to attend. That's quite a naive answer. That's quite a naive answer. So he suggests me. He gave me a good answer. He suggested me like, so I think like you should just make it more systematic in the sense like you define like a very clean policy about for example, like if you do not attend the course, you will not get the like points, and maybe you do some in-class quiz, and then to force them to attend the course, something like that. So that's definitely a more like mature and systematic way to answer this. But for me, because I really have no teaching experience, as only TA, but no like lecture experience, so I give like obviously quite a like embarrassing and naive answers. The other thing is that I think they will, because when you do interview, you will be like lots of faculty, they're from different research background. So many of them are not familiar with your like specific research area. So in that sense, they may particularly ask you some more principled questions. Some of questions for me, I actually never thought about that. For example, like they asked me, like what could be the fundamental difference between security and privacy? So at that time, I actually did not have a good answer. So I'm kind of like just get stuck there. So it's definitely shows my some lack of preparation and also lack of some more like principled thought in this field.
Yeah, this is difficult to practice, right? Because Yeah, it's difficult to step out of your own field and think about this very high level kind of questions.
Exactly. I think that's something you may want to like get prepared. I think for the good thing is that I remember because I did my homework before I like do the on-site interview, and I can remember their names. So when I like start to chat with them, like before I start chat with them, like for example, we shake hands, something like that. I can speak out their name. They will appreciate, and then they seems like they will remember me because of that. I think that's a small tip. Right. I think that's probably like what I can remember.
Yeah, then let's also briefly chat about the decision process. Can you perhaps outline like how you acted after you received the first offer? I mean, you already said that you used this basically to get a quicker decision from the other institutions you applied for. What
Right.
happened after that?
Right. So I think right. So because it actually wait quite a while. I think maybe like for Asia universities, they take probably even longer time to make decision because they are like so many like different levels of they need to report to. I think especially longer time. So in that sense, like when I get the first offer, so I can have a way to push a little bit for them to make a decision. And so after that, things become much faster. And they even asked me like, suppose I give you an offer, whether you come or not, something like that. So I also gave a quick answer, yes.
Mm.
So that makes things much easier on like both ends. Right, that's a high level idea here. I think, and the other things that, so in terms of the negotiation, so they mentioned about the start package, the salary, so on and so forth. I think at least for Asia University, you do not expect to negotiate too much because they have like a well defined like the range of payment.
Mm.
That's something actually is out of the control. As far as I understand, probably like the department head and even the dean, they cannot control that. They have very explicitly defined like, the range of payment. For example, like in Hong Kong, like the Chinese University of Hong Kong, they actually put a document online in terms of the payment range. So that's something probably you can hardly negotiate. The other thing is about the start package. I didn't negotiate that, and I'm not aware of anyone who successfully negotiated that. I would say that's probably also something like can hardly negotiate for with Asia universities. One thing I do negotiate is about the start date. So at the very beginning, they want me to start like in the just a few months after I graduate. So I said that's a bit too quick. Since I'm a fresh PhD graduate, whether there's a way, like there's a possibility that I can postpone a little bit. And they actually give me 2 or 3 options, and I tried my very best to get a 1-year option, such that I can do a 1-year postdoc, which actually helped me a lot.
Mm.
So I think start date is something you can negotiate, and also after I joined UST, I see some other recently joined faculty. They seem to also do some negotiation in terms of start date. I'm not sure if they negotiate the salary or start package, but I would say that would be very difficult.
Okay, and when deciding for the position, so what were your decision factors at this time, besides what we already discussed about, for example, the two-body situation and
the feedback from the on-site interview actually is an important factor. Because I actually talked with it's a friend, right? He was also on the job market at that time, and he actually interviewed some same institute with me, and he mentioned he actually get like quite different feedback when they like physically visit their like department, visit their campus, and that actually like justified his some misunderstanding or misexpectation about their institute. He told me like so after the on-site interview, he quickly makes some decision like some institute is something is he probably definitely do not want to join, something like that.
I think like a very important thing is that you when you take the like on-site interview, you can get some feedback to see whether department or the working environment or the entire atmosphere of the campus is really something you feel good, because it's you can hardly get such information by only look at their like website or the like the web page of their faculties. That's still like a distance, right? But if you can like really travel to their like a campus, to their department, you could definitely get more information from that, right? And that will definitely play as an important factor when you make a decision.
Did you also ever consider doing a second visit, or was the first visit basically enough to get to know everything?
I think for me, I only have like one. For every campus, I have one visit, right? Because everyone seems quite like spend a lot of effort. But for me, I only have the first one, and I think it's enough to make a decision.
Makes sense. So I would say let's slowly wrap up. And what I was curious about is what kind of roles did mentors in your application process and interviewing process play?
Mm-hmm. I think he will, like my advisor, definitely give some like very important suggestion and advice. So particularly for my job talk, right? He also gave me like he also prepared some like opportunities for me to speak to a large group of people, right? To receive different feedbacks. For example, he asked me to give a talk at the ECE department at Penn State, and I received some feedback from some hardware aspects about how you can introduce that channel in an understandable way. So that would definitely help. I think other than that, I think it's probably like the interviewee, like the candidate himself need to really like put a lot of effort to during the entire process.
Any other advice that you could also give to future faculty candidates?
So I think one thing is that I would say my strategy is a bit problematic in the sense like I only apply a very few institutes, because at that time I was thinking like, all right, so because I have the two-body problem, I only apply this, and this. But I think that's probably not the optimal way. I think the optimal way is that you need to apply as many as possible, unless you definitely do not want to go there. Because at least for me, like if you look at the track record of my peers, I mean my peers in the sense like faculty candidates, sorry, like a junior faculty, like from Asia, and also with okay publication, but definitely like not the top 10% or top 5%. They always like probably like most of them like have one or two relocations after they start their assistant professorship. So in that sense, even if you are not satisfied with the location of your first employer, like first institute, you can always find a way. Like after you accumulate, you have more like a research outputs, you have more fundings, maybe you can just relocate, right? That will be a more reasonable way to gradually like address the two-body problem. So I think my strategy is a bit problematic, right? And that actually caused some trouble because since I only interview this, so the chances of get an offer will be even lower. Right?
I see.
I think the advice is that you definitely want to apply as many as possible, unless you are 100% sure you do not want to go there. You hate there, so you do not apply. But other than that, I think you should apply.
Any final experience that you could mention that stuck with you?
I think the two-day interview is intensive. I think 1 day probably okay. A 2 days on-site interview is quite intensive. So after that, you feel exhausted in the sense like you do not even want to read the emails and write like thanks letter or something like that.
Mm.
The other thing is that the interview starts from breakfast. It does not start from like the first like the in the faculty's office. It start from the breakfast. So you need to really get yourself really well prepared, starting from the like the early morning until after the dinner. Suppose you have a dinner with faculty. Those are all interviews. Right? So really need to be careful.
Okay. Then thanks a lot, Try, for sharing all your like extremely valuable experience. I'm sure that future faculty candidates will greatly appreciate it. And yeah, with that, thank you.
Okay, I hope so. I hope it will help a bit. And thank you for offering this opportunity to help all the peers in the community to boost their like the faculty hunting.